When Canon first released the R5, it was limited to recording 4K 60 frames a second for only 38 minutes. And then the camera would shut down on you. But now, being almost 2 years old, the R5 has had a series of firmware updates that make it to the point where the R5 no longer overheats. At least not the way I use it and the way that I'd say 90% of users shooting video would use it as well. And that's because with the latest update, Canon actually introduced a high temperature auto power off setting. And if you go into the red menu over to the 8th tab, and then you go from standard to high, it actually gives you this little statement. It says recording time may be extended. Well, it definitely has, and I'll show you the test results in a minute. Please be careful when touching the camera and the card as they may get hotter than the standard method. I ran a test and I recorded in IPB mode. Now the reason I record in IPB mode, there's two settings on the R5, IPB and all I or all intra. Now the IPB is slightly more compressed and you can record to both memory card slots. And I prefer redundancy over the larger file sizes. What I found is recording 4K 60 frames a second in IPB mode, I was able to drain a full battery, meaning I could go continuously recording, or at least, in 30-minute chunks of time, because Canon limits it to 30 minutes still. I could go for a full battery, which ended up getting me about an hour and 23 minutes and 12 seconds. And I tested it twice. The first time was an hour and 23 and 12 seconds. The second time was an hour, 23 and 32 seconds. But here's the catch. The camera does get hot. And just like the warning says, it gets hot to the point where it's notably hotter when you hold the camera. After 30 minutes, I used my temperature gun here, and after 30 minutes, the body temperature went from room temperature up to 33 degrees Celsius. Then again, recording for another 30 minutes, so 60 minutes total, the body was around 40 degrees Celsius. And then after one complete battery of the high capacity batteries that you can get for these cameras, after one of these, the temperature with my temperature gun got up to 45 degrees Celsius, kind of like on the handle and the screen and the areas that you would touch. And then I took my lens off and tested the temperature on the shutter, and it was between 52 and 54 degrees Celsius, which is notably hotter even just on the outside of the body than I have ever felt my R5 get. So the camera can record for longer, but now it just gets hotter. And I guess this is a concession that Canon has made to allow users who really want to keep shooting to enable that high temperature setting and continue to get the footage that they need to get. Since owning this camera, I've shot 2 full weddings on it. One on the older firmware where I didn't have the high temperature setting enabled, so in that case it would just be on the standard setting, and during that wedding I didn't get any overheating warning. Now that's my use case because I don't continuously record. I tend to do record for a minute, stop, record at 60, then if I don't need 60 frames a second, go down to 24 frames a second. The camera in the old setting would start to build up heat in the 60 frames per second option, but then even if you got the heat warning on the 60 frames per second option, you could go down to the 24 frames per second option and continue to shoot. That's not an option that I would have with my R6. The R6 for some reason is a lot worse at managing the heat than the R5. Now there's a pretty big price difference between the R5 and the R6, but if you're someone who is using this as part of your job to make an income and to make money, I would say at this point, go with the R5 because the R6 doesn't have that high temperature overheat setting, meaning that even in 24 frames a second, once you reach the 30-minute, 40-minute mark, the camera will stop recording and there's nothing you can do about it. So all of that said, there are a lot of videos out there that have been made about the R5 within the last year and 2 years talking about how it overheats or how the overheating has gotten better. But with this latest firmware, if you are someone who is a working professional and you've thought about getting the Canon R5 as your main shooter, the firmware and all the updates that have come with it have pushed this camera to the limit where I think I would happily recommend the R5 for anyone who's a working professional. If you want to see examples of video shot with this camera, I have a full wedding video you can check out here. Otherwise, I will be doing a full review along with this 24-70, which I haven't reviewed yet, on this channel coming up in the future. So make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned for that. And if you do, I'll see you in the next one.